Train to Pakistan, Khushwant Singh, Part 10, Last Part. The crowd shouted their Amins with loud Wahegurus at the end of each supplication. They went down on their knees, rubbed their feet, foreheads on the ground, and the ceremony was over. Meet Singh came and joined the men. It was a solemn assembly. Only the children played. They chased each other around the room, laughing and arguing. The adults scolded the children. One by one, the children returned to their mother's lap and fell asleep. Then the men and women also stretched themselves on the floor in the different parts of the room. The day's events were not likely to be forgotten in sleep. Many could not sleep at all. Others slept wakefully and woke up with startled cries if a neighbor's leg or arm so much as touched them. Even the ones who snored with apparent abandon dreamed and relived the scenes of the day. They heard the sound of motor vehicles, the lowing of cattle, and people crying. They sobbed in their sleep, and their beards were moist with their tears. When the sound of a motor horn was heard once more, those who were awake but drowsy thought they were dreaming. Those that were dreaming thought they were hearing it in their dreams. In their dreams, they even said, "Yes, yes," to the voice which kept asking, "Are you all dead?" The late night visitor was a jeep like the one in which the army officers had come in the morning. It seemed to know its way about the village. It went from door to door with a voice inquiring, "Is there anyone there?" Only the dogs barked in reply. Then it came to the temple, and the engine was switched off. Two men walked into the courtyard and shouted again, "Is there anyone here, or are you all dead?" Everyone got up. Some children began to cry. Meet Singh turned up the wick of his hurricane lantern. He and the Lambardar went out to meet the visitors. The men saw the commotion they had created. They ignored the Lambardar and Meet Singh and walked up to the threshold of the large room. One looked in at the bewildered crowd and asked, "Are you all dead? Any one of you alive?" Added the other. The Lambardar answered angrily, "No one is dead in this village. What do you want?" Before the man could answer, two of their companions joined them. All were Sikhs. They wore khaki uniform and had rifles slung on their shoulder. "This village looks quite dead," repeated one of the strangers, loudly addressing his own companions. "The Guru has been merciful to this village. No one has died here," answered Meet Singh with quiet dignity. "Well, if the village is not dead, then it should be. It should be drowned in a palmful of water. It consists of eunuchs," said the visitor fiercely with a flourish of his hand. The strangers took off their shoes and came inside the large hole. The Lambardar and Meet Singh followed them. Men sat up and tied their turbans. Women put their children in their laps and tried to rock them to sleep again. One of the group, who appeared to be leader, motioned the others to sit down. Everyone sat down. The leader had an aggressive, bossy manner. He was a boy in his teens with a little beard which was glued to his chin with brilliantine. He was small in size, slight of build, and altogether somewhat effeminate. A glossy red ribbon showed under the acute angle of his bright blue turban. His khaki army shirt hung loosely from his round, drooping shoulders. He wore a black leather Sam Brown, the strap across his narrow chest charged with bullets, and the broad belt clamped about his still narrower waist. No one's On one side it has a holster with the butt of a revolver protruding. On the other side there was a dagger. He looked as if his mother had dressed him up as an American cowboy. The boy caressed the holster of his revolver and ran his fingers over the silver noses of the bullets. He looked around him with complete confidence. "Is this a Sikh village?" he asked insolently. It was obvious to the villagers that he was an educated city dweller. Such men always assumed a superior air when talking to peasants. They had no regard for age or status. "Yes, sir," answered the Lambardar. "It has always been a Sikh village. We had Muslim tenants, but they have gone." "What sort of Sikhs are you?" asked the boy, glowering meaningly. He elaborated his question. "Potent or important?" No one knew what to say. No one protested that this was not the sort of language one used in a Gurudwara with women and children sitting by. Do you know how many trainloads of dead Sikhs and Hindus have come over? Do you know of the massacres in Rawalpindi and Multan, Gujranwala and Shekhupura? What are you doing about it? You just eat and sleep and you call yourself Sikhs, the brave Sikhs, the martial class? He added, raising both his arms to emphasize his sarcasm. He surveyed his audience with the bright eyes, daring anyone to contradict him. People looked down, somewhat ashamed of themselves. What can we do, Sardarji? Questioned the Lambardar. If our government goes to war against Pakistan, we will fight. What can we do sitting in Manu Majra? Government? Sneered the boy contemptuously. You expect the government to do anything? A government consists of cowardly Bania moneylenders. Do the Muslims in Pakistan apply for permission from their government when they rape your sisters? Do they apply for permission when they stop trains and kill everyone? Old, young, women, and children? You want the government to do something? That is great. Shabash. Brave. He gave the holster on his side a jaunty smack. But Sardar Sahib, said the Lambardar falteringly, do tell us what we can do. That is better, answered the lad. Now we can talk. Listen and listen carefully. He paused, looked around, and started again. He spoke slowly, emphasizing each sentence by stabbing the air with his forefinger. For each Hindu or Sikh they kill two Muslims. For each woman they abduct or rape, abduct two. For each home they loot two. For each trainloads of dead they send two across. For each road convoy that is attacked, attack two. That will stop the killing on the other side. It will teach them that we also pay this game of killing and looting. He stopped to gauge the effect he had created. People listened to him with open mouth attention. Only Meet Singh did not took up. He cleared his thought but stopped. Well, brother, why do you keep quiet? Asked the lad, throwing a challenge. I was going to say, said Meet Singh haughtily. I was going to say, he repeated, what have the Muslims here done to us for us to kill them in revenge for what Muslims in Pakistan are doing? Only people who have committed crimes should be punished. The lad glared angrily at Meet Singh. What had the Sikhs and Hindus in Pakistan done that they were butchered? Weren't they innocent? Had the women committed crimes for which they were ravished? Had the children committed murder for which they were spiked in front of their parents? Meet Singh was subdued. The boy wanted to squash him further. Why, brother? Now speak and say what do you want to? I am an old bhai. I could not lift my hands against anyone. Fight in battle or kill the killer. What bravery is there in killing unarmed innocent people? As for women, you know that the last Guru, Guru Gobind Singh, made it a part of a baptismal oath that no Sikh was to touch the person of a Muslim woman, and alone knows how he suffered at the hands of the Muslims. They killed all his four sons. Teach this sort of Sikhism to someone else, snapped the boy contemptuously. It is your sort of people who have been the curse of this country. You quote the Guru about women. Why don't you tell us what he said about the Muslims? Only befriend the Turk when all other communities are dead. Is that correct? Yes, answered Meet Singh meekly, but nobody is asking you to befriend them. Besides, the Guru himself had Muslim in his army, and one of them stabbed him while he slept. Meet Singh felt uneasy. One of them stabbed him while he slept, repeated the boy. Yes, but there are bad ones, and show me a good one. Meet Singh could not keep up with the repartee. He just looked down at his feet. His silence was taken as an admission of defeat. Let him be. He is an old bhai. Let him stick to his prayers, said many in a chorus. The speaker was appeased. He addressed the assembly again in pompous tones. Remember, he said like an oracle. Remember and never forget. A Muslim knows no argument but the sword. The crowd murmured approval. Is there anyone believer of the Guru here? Anyone who wants to sacrifice his life for the Sikhs community? Anyone with the courage? He hurled each sentence like a challenge. The villagers felt very uncomfortable. The harangue had made them angry and they wanted to prove their manliness. At the same time, Meet Singh's presence made them uneasy and they felt they were being disloyal to him. What are we supposed to do? Asked the Lambardar plaintively. I will tell you What we are to do, answered the boy, pointing to himself. If you have the courage to do it, he continued after a pause. Tomorrow, a train load of Muslims is to cross the bridge to Pakistan. If you are men, this train should carry as many people dead to the other side as you have received. A cold, calmy feeling spread among the audience. People coughed nervously. The train will have Mano Majra Muslims on it, said Meet Singh without looking up. But, Bhai, you seem to know everything, don't you? Yelled the youth furiously. Did you give them the tickets? Or is your son a railway babu? I don't know who the Muslims on the train are. I do not care. It is enough for me to know that they are Muslims. They will not cross this river alive. If you agree with me, we can talk. If you are frightened, then say so, and we will say Sat Sri Akal to you and look for real men elsewhere. Another long period of silence ensued. The lad beat a tattoo on his holster and patiently scanned the faces around him. There is a military guard at the bridge. It was Malli. He had been standing outside in the dark. He would not have dared to come back to Mano Majra alone. Yet there he was, boldly stepping into the Gurudwara. Several members of his gang appeared at the door. You need not bother about the military or the police. No one will interfere. We will see to that, answered the lad, looking back at him. Are there any volunteers? My life is at your disposal, said Malli heroically. The story of Jagga beating him had gone round the village. His reputation had to be redeemed. Bravo, said the speaker. At least one man. The Guru asked for 5 lives when he made the 6. Those 6 were Superman. We need many more than 5. Who else is willing to lay down his life? 4 of Mali's companions stepped over the threshold. They were followed by many others, mostly refugees. Some villagers who had only recently wept at the departure of their Muslim friends also stood up to volunteer. Each time anyone raised his hand, the youth said bravo and asked him to come and sit apart. More than 50 agreed to join in the escapade. That is enough, said the lead, raising his hands. If I need any more volunteers, I will ask for them. Let us pray for the success of our venture. Everyone stood up. Women put their children on the floor and joined the menfolk. The assembly faced the little cot on which the Granth lay wrapped and folded their hands in prayer. The boy turned round to Meet Singh. Will you lead the prayer, Bhaiji? He asked tauntingly. It is your mission, Sardar Sahib, replied Meet Singh humbly. You lead the prayer. The boy cleared his throat, shut his eyes, began to recite the names of the Guru. He ended by asking for the Guru's blessings for the venture. The assembly went down on their knees and rubbed their foreheads on the grounds, loudly proclaiming, in the name of Nanak, by the hope that faith doth instill, by the grace of God, we bear the world nothing but goodwill. The crowd stood up again and began to chant. The Sikhs will rule, their enemies will be scattered, only they that seek refuge will be saved. The little ceremonial ended with triumphant cries of Sat Sri Akal. Everyone sat down except the body boy leader. The prayer had given him a veneer of humility. He joined his hands and apologized to assembly. Sisters and brothers, forgive me for disturbing you at this late hour. You too, Bhaiji, and you, Lambardar Sahib, please forgive us for this inconvenience and for angry words that I may have uttered. But this is in the service of the Guru. Volunteers will now adjourn to the other room. The others may rest. Sat Sri Akal. Sat Sri Akal, replied some of the audience. Meeting's room, Meet Singh's room on the side of the courtyard was cleared of women and children. The visitors moved in with the volunteers. More lamps were brought in. The leader spread out a map on one of the beds. He led up a hurricane lantern. The volunteers crowded round him to study the map. Can you see? Can you all see the position of the bridge and the river from where you are? He asked. Yes, they answered impatiently. Have any of you got guns? They all looked at each other. No, no one had a gun. It doesn't matter, continued the leader. We still have 6 and 7 rifles and probably a couple of stun guns as well. Bring your swords and spears. They will be more useful than guns. He paused. The plan is this. Tomorrow after sunset, when it is dark, we will stretch a rope across the first span of the bridge. It will be a foot above the height of the funnel of the engine. When the train passes under it, it will sweep off all the people sitting on the roof of the train. That will account for at least 4 to 500. The eyes of the listeners sparkled with admiration. They nodded to each other and looked around. The Lambardar and Meet Singh stood at the door listening. The boy turned round angrily. Bhaiji, what have you to do with this? Why don't you go and say your prayers? Both the Lambardar and Meet Singh turned away sheepishly. The Lambardar knew he too would be told off if he hung around. And you, Lambardar Sahib, said the boy, you should be going to the police station to report. Everyone laughed. The boy silenced his audience by raising his hand. He continued, the train is due to leave Chandunagar after midnight. It will have no lights, not even on the engine. We will post people with flashlights along the track every 100 yards. Each one will give the signal to the next person as the train passes him. In any case, you will be able to hear it. People with swords and spears will ride at the bridge to deal with those that fall off the roof of the train. They will have to be killed and thrown into the river. Men with guns will be few yards up the track and will shoot at the windows. There will be no danger of firing being returned. There are only a dozen Pakistani soldiers on the train. In the dark, they will not know where to shoot. They will not have time to load their guns. If they stop the train, we will take care of them and kill many more into the bargain. It seemed a perfect plan. Without the slightest danger of retaliation, everyone was pleased. It is already past midnight, said the boy, folding up the map. You would all better get some sleep. Tomorrow morning we will go to the bridge and decide where each one is to be posted. The six are the chosen of God. Victory be to our God. Victory to our God, answered the others. The meeting dispersed. Visitors found room in the Gurudwara. So did Malli and his gang. Many of the villagers had gone away to their homes lest they get implicated in the crime by being present at the temple when the conspiracy was being hatched. The Lambardar took two of the villagers with him and left for the police station at Chandunagar. Well, Inspector Sahib, let them kill, said Hukum Chand wearily. Let everyone kill. Just ask for help from other stations and keep a record of the messages you send. We must be able to prove that we did our best to stop them. Hukum Chand looked a tired man. A 1 week had aged him beyond recognition. The white at the roots of his hair had become longer. He had been shaving in a hurry and had cut himself in several places. His cheeks sagged and folds of flesh fell like dewlaps above his chin. He kept rubbing the corners of his eyes for the yellow which was not there. What I am to do? He wailed. The whole world has gone mad. Let it go mad. What does it matter if another thousands get killed? We will get a bulldozer and bury them as we did the others. We may not even need the bulldozer if this time it is going to be on the river. Just throw the corpses in water. What is the few hundred out of 400 million away? Anyway, an epidemic takes 10 times the number and no one even bothers. The sub inspector knew that this was not the real Hukum Chand. He was only trying to get the melancholia out of his system. The sub inspector waited patiently, then dropped a feeler. Yes, sir, I am keeping a record of what all that is happening and what we are doing. Last evening, we had to evacuate Chandunagar. I could not rely on the army nor my own constables. The best I could do was to ward off the attackers by telling them that Pakistan troops were in the town. That frightened them and I got Muslims out in the nick of time. When the attackers discovered the trick, they looted and burned every Muslim house they could. I believe some of them planned to come to the police station for me, but better counsel prevailed. So you see, sir, all I got was abuse from Muslims for evicting them from their homes, abuse from the Sikhs for having robbed them of the loot they were expecting. Now I suppose the government will also abuse me for something or the other. All I really have is my big thumb. The sub inspector stuck out his thumb and smiled. Hukumchand's mind was not itself that morning. He did not seem to realize the full import of the sub inspector's report. Yes, yes, Inspector Sahib, you and I are going to get nothing out of this. Expect a bad name. What can we do? Everyone has gone trigger happy. People empty their rifle magazines into densely packed trains, motor convoys, columns of marching refugees, columns of marching refugees, as if they were squirting red water at the holy festival. It is a bloody holy. What sense is there in going to a place where bullets fly? The bullets does not pause and consider. This is Hukum Chand. I must not touch him. Nor does a bullet have a name written on it saying sent by so and so. Even if it did bear a name once inside, what consolation would it be to us to know who fired it? No, Inspector Sahib, the only thing a sane person can do in a lunatic asylum is to pretend that he is as mad as the others and at the first opportunity scales the walls and get out. The sub inspector was used to see these sermons and knew how little they represented the magistrate's real self. But Hukum Chand's apparent inability to take a hint was surprising. He was known for never saying a thing straight. He considered it stupid. To him, the art of diplomacy was to state a simple thing in an involved manner. He never got one into trouble. It could never be quoted as having implied this or that. At the same time, it gave one the reputation of being shrewd and clever. Hukum Chand was as adept at discovering innuendos as he was at making them. This morning he seemed to be giving his mind at rest. You should have been in Chundunagar yesterday, said the sub inspector, bringing the conversation back to the actual problem which faced him. If I had been 5 minutes later, there would not have been one Muslim left alive. As it is, not one was killed. I was able to take them all out. The sub inspector emphasized, not one and all. He watched Hukum Chand's reaction. It worked. Hukum Chand stopped rubbing the corners of his eyes and asked casually, as if he was only seeking information, you mean to tell me there is not one Muslim family left in Chandunagar? No, sir, not one. I suppose, said Hukum Chand, clearing his thought. They will come back when all this blows over. Maybe, the sub inspector answered. There is not much for them to come back to. Their homes have been burned and occupied, and if anyone did come back, his or her life would be not be worth the tiniest shell in the sea. It will not last forever. You see how things change. Within a week, they will be back in Chandunagar, and the Sikhs and the Muslims will be drinking water out of the same pitcher. Hukum Chand detected the note of false hope in his own voice. So did the sub inspector. You may be right, sir, but it will certainly take more than a week for that to happen. Chandunagar refugees are being taken to Pakistan by train tonight. God alone knows how many will go across the bridge alive. Those that do are not likely to want to come back in a hurry. The sub inspector had hit the mark. The Hukum Chand's face went pale. He could no longer keep up the pretense. How do you know that Chandunagar refugees are going by night train? He asked. I got it from the camp commander. There was danger of attack on the camp itself, so he decided to get the first train available to take the refugees out. If they do not go, probably no one will be left alive. If they do, though, some at least may get through, if the train is running at some speed. They are not planning to derail the train. They wanted to go on to Pakistan with a cargo of corpses. Hukum Chand clutched the arms of his chair convulsively. Why don't you warn the camp commander about it? He may decide not to go. Cherisher of the poor, explained the sub inspector patiently. I have not told him anything about the proposed attack on the train, because if he does not go, the whole camp may be destroyed. There were the mobs of 20 to 30 armed villagers. There are mobs of 20 to 30,000 armed villagers thirsting for blood. I have 50 policemen with me, and not one of them would fire a shot at a Sikh. But if your honor can use influence with these mobs, I can tell the camp commander about the plans to ambush the train and persuade him not to go. The sub inspector was hitting below the belt. No, no, shuddered the magistrate. What can influence do with armed mobs? No, we must think. Hukum Chand sank back in his chair. He covered his face with his hands. He beat his forehead gently with his clenched fist. He tugged at his hair as if he could pull ideas out of his brain. What has happened to those two men you arrested for the moneylender's murder? He asked after some time. The sub inspector did not see the relevance of the inquiry. They are still in the lockup. You ordered me to keep them till the trouble was over. At this rate, it seems I will have to keep them for some months. Are there any Muslim females or any stray Muslims who have refused to leave Mano Majra? No, sir, not one remains. Men, women, children all have left. answered the sub-inspector. He was still unable to catch up with Hukumchand's train of thought. What about Jagga's weaver girls you told me about? What was her name? Nooran. Ah, yes, Nooran. Where is she? He has left. She has left. Her father was a sort of leader of the Muslims of Mano Majra. The Lambardar told me a great deal about him. He had just one child, this girl Nooran. She is the alleged she is the one alleged to be carrying on with the dacoit Jagga. And this other fellow? Didn't you say he was a political worker of some sort? Yes, sir, People's Party or something like that. I think he is a Muslim leaguer masquerading under a false label I examined. Have you got any blank official papers for orders? Cut in Hukumchand impatiently. Yes, sir, answered the sub inspector. He fished out several pieces of yellow printed paper and handed them to the magistrate. Hukumchand stretched out his hands and plucked the sub inspector's fountain pen from his pocket. What are the names of the prisoners? He asked, spreading out the sheets on the table. Jagga Badmash. Jagga Badmash, interrupted Hukumchand, filled in the blank and signing it. Jagga Badmash and, he asked, taking the other paper. Iqbal Muhammad or Muhammad Iqbal? I'm not sure which. Not Muhammad Iqbal Muhammad, Inspector Sahib, nor Muhammad Iqbal. Iqbal Singh, he said, writing a flourish. The sub inspector looked a little stupefied. How did Hukumchand know? Had Meet Singh been calling around on the magistrate? Sir, you should not believe everyone I examined. Do you really believe an educated Muslim would dare to come to these parts in times like this? Do you think any part would be so foolish as to send a Muslim to preach peace to sick peasants thirsting for Muslim blood? Inspector Sahib, where is your imagination? The sub inspector was subdued. It did seem unlikely that an uneducated man without would risk his neck for any cause. Besides, he had noticed on Iqbal's right wrist the steel bangle all six wear. Your Honor must be right, but what has this to do with the preventing of an attack on the train? My honor is right, said Hukumchand triumphantly, and you will soon know why. Think about it on your way to Chundunagar. As soon as you get there, release both the men and see that they leave for Mano Majra immediately. If necessary, get them a tonga. They must be in the village by the evening. The sub inspector took the papers and saluted. He sped back to the police station on his cycle. Gradually, the clouds of confusion lifted from his mind. Hukumchand's plan became a crystal clear as the day with heavy rain. You will find Mano Majra somewhat changed, the sub inspector remarked, casually addressing the table in front of him. Iqbal and Jagga stood facing him on the other side. Why don't you sit down, Babu Sahib? Said the sub inspector. This time he spoke directly to Iqbal. Please take a chair. What is your name? Why don't you bring a chair for the Babu Sahib? He shouted at the constable. I know you are angry with me, but it is not my fault, he continued. I have my duty to do. You, as an educated man, know what would happen if I were to treat people differently. The constable brought a chair for Iqbal. Do sit down. Shall I get you a cup of tea or something before you go? The sub inspector smiled unctuously. It is very kind of you. I would rather keep standing. I have been sitting in the cell all these days. If you do not mind, I would like to leave as soon as you have finished with the formalities, answered Iqbal without responding to the other's smile. You are free to go whenever and wherever you want to. I have sent for a tonga to take you to the Mano Majra. I will send an armed constable to accompany you. It is not safe to be about in Chandunagar or to travel unescorted. The sub inspector picked up a yellow paper and read, Jugat Singh, son of Alam Singh, age 24, caste Sikh of village Mano Majra, Badmash number 10. Yes, sir, interrupted Jagga smiling. The treatment he had received from the police had not made any difference to him. His equation with authority was simple. He was on the other side. Personality did not come into it. Sub inspectors and policemen were people in khaki who frequently arrested him, always abused him, and sometimes beat him. Since they abused and beat him without anger or hate, they were not human beings with names. They were only denominations one tried to get the better of. If one failed, it was just bad luck. You are being released, but you must appear before Hukum Chand, Deputy Commissioner, on the 1st of October 1947 at 10 a.m. Put your thumb impression on this. The sub inspector opened a flat tin box with a black gauge padding inside it. He caught Jugat Singh's thumb in his hand, rubbed it on the damp pad, and pressed it on the paper. Have I permission to go? Asked Jagga. You can go with Babu Sahib in the Tonga. Otherwise, you will not get home before dark. He looked up at the Jagga and repeated slowly, "You will not find Manu Majra the same." Neither of the men showed any interest in Sub Inspector's remark about Manu Majra. The Sub Inspector spread out another piece of paper and read, "Mr. Iqbal, social worker." Iqbal looked at the paper cynically. "Not Muhammad Iqbal, member of the Muslim League? You seem to be fabricate facts and documents as it pleases you." The sub-inspector grinned. "Everyone makes mistake. To err is human, to forgive divine." He added in English, "I admit my mistake." "That is very generous of you," answered Iqbal. "I had always believed that the Indian police were infallible. You can make fun of me if you like. You do not realize that if you had been going about lecturing as you intended it and had fallen into the hands of the Sikh mob, they would not have listened to your arguments. They would have stripped you to find out whether or not you were circumcised. That is the only test they have these days for a person who has not got long hair and a beard. Then they kill. You should not be grateful to me. You should be grateful to me." The Iqbal was in no mood to talk. Besides, the subject was not one he wanted to discuss with anyone. He resented the way the sub-inspector took the liberty of mentioning it. "We will find big changes in Mano Majra," warned the sub-inspector for the third time. Neither Jagga nor Iqbal showed any response. Iqbal laid on the table the book he had been holding and turned away without a word of thanks or farewell. Jagga felt the floor with his foot for his shoes. "All Mussalmans have gone from Mano Majra," answered the sub-inspector dramatically. Jagga stopped shuffling his feet. "Where have they gone?" "Yesterday they were taken to the refugee camp. Tonight they will go by train to Pakistan." "Was there any trouble in the village, Inspector Sahib? What did they have to do go? Why did they have to go?" "There would have been if they had not gone. There are lots of outsiders going about with guns killing Muslims. Malli and his name have joined them. If the Muslims had not left Manu Majra, Malli would have finished them off by now. He has taken all their things: cows, buffaloes, oxen, mares, chicken, utensils. Malli has done well." Jagga's temper shot up at once. "That penis of a pig who sleeps with his mother, pimps for his sister and daughter. If he puts his foot in Mano Majra, I will stick my bamboo pole up his behind." The sub-inspector pursed his lips in a taunting smile. "You talk big, Sardar. Just because you caught him unawares by his hair and beat him, you think you are a lion? Malli is not a woman with henna on his palms or bangles on his wrists. He has been in Mano Majra and taken all the things he wanted. He is still there. You will see him when you get back. He will run like a jackal when he hears my name. Men of his gang are with him. So are many others, all armed with guns and pistols. You had better behave sensibly if you hold your life dear." Jagga nodded his head. "Right, Inspector Sahib, we will meet again, and then ask me about Malli." His temper got the better of him. "If I do not spit in his bottom, my name is not Jagat Singh." He rubbed his mouth with the back of his hands. "If I do not spit in Malli's mouth, my name is not Jagat Singh." This time Jagat Singh spat on his hand and rubbed it on his thigh. His temper rose